He canceled her seat with a few taps, then handed the only boarding pass to the woman standing beside him. "Watch the plane leave without you," Marcus said, loud enough for the people at the gate to hear. His wife, Elena Ward, had just buried her mother 3 hours earlier. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She only glanced up at the departure screen, then at the airline logo above the counter. What Marcus didn't know, what no one there knew, was that the woman he'd just stranded wasn't just his broke, quiet wife. She quietly owned controlling interest in the airline they were about to board, and she had just decided she was done waiting. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hours earlier, grief had been the only thing Elena was carrying. The funeral had been small, quiet, just a handful of people who actually knew her mother beyond polite holiday calls and distant obligations. Elena had stood by the grave longer than anyone else, her black coat catching the cold wind, her hands still and steady, even as the last of the mourners drifted away. Marcus hadn't been there. He had texted emergency. Couldn't make it. She had read it without replying, slipped the phone back into her bag, and stayed beside the casket until the groundskeeper gently asked if she needed anything else. She hadn't. Now she stood in a brightly lit airport terminal that smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning solution, a place far too alive for the weight pressing against her chest. Her suitcase stood beside her, small, practical, nothing that drew attention. Just like everything else about her, Marcus had arrived 15 minutes late, already irritated, already impatient, as if her mother's death had somehow inconvenienced his schedule. And he hadn't come alone. Naomi stood at his side now, polished and composed, her coat tailored, her smile easy. She looked like someone who belonged in first-class lounges and rooftop bars. She looked like someone Marcus wanted to be seen with. Elena didn't need an introduction. The way Naomi's hand rested lightly on Marcus's arm said enough. "There's been a change," Marcus had said, as if he were announcing a delayed flight instead of rewriting the end of a marriage. Elena had looked at him, her expression calm in a way that made him slightly uncomfortable, though he didn't know why. "What kind of change?" she asked. He shrugged, casual, dismissive. "The account couldn't cover 2 seats on the last flight. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal." Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the boarding pass as Marcus handed it to her. The paper made a soft, final sound as it changed hands. "You can catch something in the morning," Marcus added. "Figure it out." Behind them, his mother stood with her arms crossed, her expression already settled into quiet judgment. His younger brother lingered a few steps back, phone in hand, watching like this was something worth recording. No one stepped in. No one questioned it. Of course they didn't. In their eyes, Elena had always been temporary, replaceable. A quiet presence that never quite matched the image Marcus was trying to build. She had let them believe that. 14 years of marriage had taught her something simple. People didn't just reveal who they were in moments of kindness. They revealed it in moments like this, at the gate, in public, when they thought they had nothing to lose. "Say something," Naomi said softly, almost amused. "It's a little awkward otherwise." Elena looked at her for a brief moment. Really looked. Then she shifted her gaze upward. The departure board flickered with rows of destinations, times, gates, codes, all moving in quiet coordination. Just above the counter, the airline's logo glowed in clean, polished lettering. Elena held her gaze there a second longer than necessary, Marcus noticed. "What? You memorizing it?" he said with a short laugh. "It's not going to help." There was a time when she would have answered, when she would have tried to smooth things over, to make sense of his tone, his choices, his distance. That time had passed quietly, without announcement. She adjusted the strap of her bag instead. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. She didn't check it. Not yet. "Come on," Marcus said to Naomi, already turning away. "Boarding's starting." Naomi followed, her heels clicking softly against the floor. The boarding pass held like something she had earned. Marcus didn't look back. His mother gave Elena one last glance, something between pity and approval, before following her son toward the gate. The brother lingered just long enough to angle his phone again, capturing Elena standing alone beneath the bright lights. "Crazy night, huh?" he muttered under his breath, more to his camera than to her. Elena didn't react. She stood there for a moment, the noise of the terminal moving around her, people passing, announcements echoing overhead. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up, one missed call, one message, from a number saved under a name most people would have ignored. She read just the first line: "Board confirmation complete, awaiting your authorization." Her thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, something flickered across her face. Not anger, not griefs. She locked the phone without replying. Not here. Not like this. Instead, she picked up her suitcase and walked, steady and unhurried, toward the counter where the gate agent stood. The young man behind the desk looked up with a polite, practiced smile. "Mom, do you need assistance with?" Elena set her bag down beside her. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, controlled. "Certain. Run my name," she said. The agent blinked. "I'm sorry? Not the ticket," Elena added gently. "My name." For the first time that night, someone paused. And somewhere behind the glass doors leading to the jet bridge, Marcus laughed at something Naomi said, completely unaware of the line that had just been crossed. The gate agent hesitated. Not the kind of hesitation trained into customer service, not the polite pause while checking a system. This was different. Subtle, but real. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he looked at Elena again, as if trying to understand whether she was serious. "Mom," he said carefully, lowering his voice a notch. "I can only access reservations with a confirmation number or my legal name," Elena repeated, just as calm. "Please." There was something in the way she said it. Not demanding, not emotional, just certain. The agent swallowed and turned back to the screen. Behind him, the airline's logo reflected faintly in the glass panel. Elena noticed it again, the clean lines, the color scheme she knew better than most people ever would. She let her eyes rest there for a moment before returning to the agent. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. This time, she didn't ignore it. She unlocked the screen just enough to read the second line of the message. "Board control secured. Legal standing confirmed." Awaiting instruction. Her thumb hovered, then she locked it again without replying. Not yet. The agent typed her name slowly, sounding it out under his breath. Elena Ward. He hit enter. For a second, nothing changed. Just the usual interface. Passenger records. Flight data. Then the screen shifted. His posture changed before his face did. Shoulders tightening, back straightening. He leaned closer to the monitor, eyes narrowing else. Then again, Elena watched the small movement, the quiet unraveling of assumption. "Is there a problem?" she asked gently. The agent didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened slightly, as if he wasn't sure what he was allowed to say. "I just need to verify something," he said finally, voiced lower now. "Of course." Behind her, the terminal noise continued like nothing had changed. Conversations, rolling suitcases, a distant announcement about boarding for another flight. But closer to the counter, something subtle had shifted. The agent reached for the phone at his station. "Elena Ward," he said into it, careful registry on that. "Yeah, I'll hold." A hold. A pause. His eyes flicked toward Elena, then quickly back to the screen. Elena didn't move. She stood with her hands lightly resting on the handle of her suitcase, her posture straight but relaxed. Anyone passing by would have seen a composed woman handling a minor travel issue. Not a confrontation, not a turning point, just another passenger. A minute passed. Then the agent straightened completely. "Yes," he said quietly into the phone. "She's here." Another pause. His face went still. Understood. He hung up slowly. When he looked at Elena again, the polite distance was gone. Not replaced with fear. Not exactly. Something closer to recognition. And caution. "Mom," he said, voice measured, "could you wait here for just a moment?" "I can." He nodded once and stepped away from the counter, walking quickly toward a door marked staff only. Elena watched him go. Behind the glass doors leading to the jet bridge, Marcus and Naomi were nearly out of sight now, moving with the flow of passengers. Naomi's hand still held the boarding pass. Marcus's posture still carried that easy confidence, the kind built on being right too many times in a row. He hadn't looked back. Elena didn't expect him to. Her phone vibrated again. This time, a call. She stepped slightly to the side out of the main line and answered, yes. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, familiar. We received confirmation from the board. You now hold controlling authority across the group. There's a vote scheduled for final ratification tomorrow morning. We need your directive before that. Elena's gaze drifted again to the airline logo. I saw the message, she said. There's one more thing, the voice added. We've been informed there's an internal irregularity flagged on this terminal. Someone accessed executive registry from a public counter. Security is escalating. Elena's lips curved just slightly. Not quite a smile, that would be me, a pause. I see. I'm at the gate, she continued, tone even. I asked them to check. Understood. Do you want us to step in? Elena looked through the glass again. Marcus was still there, just at the edge of the jet bridge, laughing at something Naomi said. Careless. Comfortable. Certain. No, Elena said quietly. Not yet. Very well. We'll stand by. She ended the call. A few seconds later, the staff door opened again. The gate agent returned, but he wasn't alone. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out with him, her pace quick, her expression focused. A supervisor. Maybe more than that. She stopped a few feet from Elena, taking her in with a brief, assessing look. Miss Ward? She asked. Yes. The woman gave a small nod, her tone shifting instantly. Thank you for waiting. We just need to confirm a few details. Elena inclined her head slightly. Of course. Behind them, the boarding announcement echoed again. Final call. Passengers were disappearing down the jet bridge. Marcus would already be inside by now, settling into his seat. Believing the night was over, believing he had already won, the supervisor glanced at the agent, then back at Elena. Would you be able to step with us for a moment? Somewhere more private? Elena looked at the counter, then at the glass doors, then back at the woman. No, she said calmly. We can do it here. A brief silence followed. The supervisor studied her again, this time more carefully. Then she nodded. All right. She turned to the agent, cleared the line. The agent blinked. Mom? Temporarily, she said, redirect passengers to the next counter. Something in her tone left no room for argument. The agent moved quickly, signaling to another employee, guiding confused passengers away with quiet apologies. The space in front of the counter began to empty. And for the first time since Elena had walked up, the noise around her softened just a little. The supervisor stepped closer. Miss Ward, she said, lowering her voice. We're going to need to confirm your authorization level. Elena met her gaze without hesitation. Then let's do that. Behind the glass, the jet bridge door began to close, and just before it sealed, Marcus turned his head, only briefly, only out of habit, and caught a glimpse of movement back at the gate, of people gathering, of attention shifting, of something changing. His smile faded, just slightly. Then the door shut, and the supervisor in front of Elena reached for her tablet, her expression tightening as the verification screen loaded. Mom, she said quietly, I need to ask you one more question before we proceed. Elena didn't look away. Go ahead. The supervisor took a breath. Are you confirming that you are the acting controlling owner of North Atlantic Air Group? A beat of silence passed, just long enough for the weight of the question to settle, and for the first time that night the answer was no longer something Elena could keep entirely to herself. Elena held the supervisor's gaze. There was no hesitation in her posture, but there was calculation in her silence. The question wasn't difficult. It wasn't even unexpected. It was simply early, too early. Yes, she said at last, her voice steady but not raised. I am. The words didn't echo. They didn't draw attention from across the terminal. But within the small circle around the counter, they landed with weight. Supervisor exhaled slowly, almost as if she had been bracing for exactly that answer. Understood, she said, her tone shifting again, sharper now. Then I'm going to need to escalate this immediately. Elena nodded once. Do what you need to do. The supervisor stepped aside and spoke quietly into her headset, not loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, but enough that the urgency carried through her clipped phrasing. Confirmed. Initiate executive protocol at gate C12. Yes. Now. The gate agent stood still beside her, his hands no longer moving. He wasn't looking at Elena the way he had before, not as a passenger with a problem. Something had changed in his understanding, even if he didn't fully grasp it yet. Elena turned slightly, her gaze drifting back toward the jet bridge. The door had already sealed. The last passengers were gone. The plane would be pushing back soon. Marcus was inside, still unaware, still convinced the night had ended exactly the way he wanted. Elena felt the weight in her chest again. Not sharp, not overwhelming, just present. Grief didn't disappear because something else demanded attention. It stayed, quiet, patient, much like everything else she had learned to carry. Behind her, footsteps approached. Two men in dark suits crossed the terminal quickly, their pace controlled but urgent. They didn't wear airline uniforms. Their posture, their focus, it was different. They stopped a few feet from Elena. "Miss Ward?" one of them asked. "Yes." He inclined his head slightly. Not a bow, not overt, but unmistakably respectful. "We've been notified. We're here to assist." The supervisor stepped back instinctively, giving them space. Elena studied them for a brief moment. Internal security, most likely. Not local. Not airport level. Corporate. "That was fast," she said. "We were already on standby," the second man replied. "Of course they were." Elena nodded. "Then you know the situation." "We do," the first man said. "There's a request from operations to delay pushback until confirmation is complete." Elena's eyes flickered once toward the window overlooking the tarmac. The plane sat there, lights steady, engines quiet for now. Delay. A simple word, but not a small action. She thought about Marcus in his seat, about Naomi beside him, about the certainty in his voice just minutes ago. "Watch the plane leave without you." Elena let out a quiet breath. "No," she said. Both men looked at her. "Let it proceed as scheduled." The first man hesitated. "Mom, if there's a concern regarding your—" "There isn't," Elena interrupted gently. "Not for the aircraft. The distinction was clear. The plane could leave. That didn't mean everyone on it would arrive the same way." The man nodded. Understood. He stepped aside and spoke into his own device, relaying the instruction. Behind the counter, the supervisor was now watching Elena with a different kind of attention. Not just recognition. Something closer to caution and curiosity. "Ms. Ward," she said, her voice lower now, "we'll need to verify documentation and confirm your directive authority for anything beyond standard operations." Elena met her gaze. "You will. But before we proceed further," the supervisor added carefully, "there's a question of access. Your profile is layered. Some of it is restricted even at this level. That's intentional, I assumed so." A brief silence passed between them. Then Elena reached into her coat and pulled out her phone again. She unlocked it fully this time, navigating with practiced ease. A few taps, a secure app, a biometric confirmation. She turned the screen toward the supervisor. The woman leaned in slightly. For a moment, nothing showed on her face. Then her expression changed. Subtle, controlled, but undeniable. "I see," she said quietly. She straightened immediately. "We'll move this to a secured channel." "No," Elena said again, calm but firm. "We'll handle it here." Another pause. The supervisor nodded. "All right." She turned to the agent. "Lock the station." The agent moved quickly, fingers flying across the keyboard, restricting access, disabling standard inputs. The terminal screen shifted again, this time into a different interface entirely. Elena watched it happen. She knew that system, not from the outside, from the inside. Her phone vibrated once more. This time the message was shorter. "Board notified. Media risk flagged. Awaiting containment directive." Elena read it, then closed her eyes briefly. Media risk. Of course. There had been phones. Cameras. Marcus's brother recording. Strangers watching. What had been a private humiliation minutes ago was already on its way to becoming something else. She opened her eyes again. "Contain it," she said quietly, almost to herself. The supervisor glanced at her. "Mom?" Elena looked up. No internal leak, no press confirmation. Not yet. "Yes, Mom." The instruction was passed immediately. Across the terminal, movement continued. Normal, unaware. People checking watches, lining up for other flights, scrolling through their phones. But within this small space, everything had shifted. The agent stepped back from the terminal, giving Elena a clear view of the screen. "Verification complete," he said, his voice tight. The supervisor glanced at it, then back at Elena. "All that's left," she said carefully, "is your directive." Elena didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward the glass. The plane's lights brightened. A low hum began to build as the engines prepared. Inside, Marcus would be settling in, maybe already texting someone, maybe already telling the story his way. She could almost hear it. She couldn't afford 2 seats. I had to make a call. Elena's grip tightened slightly on the handle of her suitcase. Then she looked back at the screen. At this moment, the supervisor continued, "You have the authority to override passenger clearance, reassign seating," or, Elena raised a hand, stopping her. Not sharply. Just enough. "I know what I can do," she said. The supervisor fell silent. Another second passed. Then Elena reached forward and placed her hand lightly on the counter, her eyes steady on the system in front of her. "For now," she said, her voice quiet but unmistakable, "we're not removing anyone." The supervisor nodded slowly. Understood, but Elena didn't step back. Her gaze remained fixed on the screen, because there was something else there, a file, recently accessed. Not by her, not by the agent, a passenger record, linked, flagged. Elena's expression didn't change, but something inside her shifted. "Open that," she said. The agent hesitated. "Mom, open it." He did. The file loaded. And on the screen, under linked records and shared financial activity, one name appeared beside Marcus's. Naomi. Along with something else, a transfer history, recent, large. Elena's fingers stilled on the edge of the counter. Not just betrayal, not just humiliation. Something deeper, something planned. And behind her, somewhere in the terminal, a phone rang loudly. Not hers, the supervisor's. She answered quickly, listening for a second before her face tightened. "Mom," she said, turning back to Elena, "we may have a situation." Elena didn't look away from the screen. "What kind of situation?" The supervisor took a breath. "The aircraft you just cleared for departure," a pause, "has just been flagged for a financial hold request from corporate audit." The engines outside grew louder, and, for the first time since the gate, something truly unexpected entered the equation. The supervisor's words hung in the air for a second longer than they should have. The engines outside were already humming, the sound low and steady, a signal that the aircraft was moments from pushback. Everything was moving forward. Everything was supposed to continue. Except now it wasn't. Elena didn't look away from the screen. "Audit flagged it?" she asked. "Yes, Mom," the supervisor said. "It just came through. Financial hold request tied to internal review. It's unusual at this stage, unusual." Elena's eyes moved slightly across the data in front of her. The transfer records were still open. Naomi's name and the amounts, the timestamps. Recent, too recent. "This isn't random," Elena said quietly. "No, Mom." The agent shifted beside them, uncertain. "Does that mean the flight has to be delayed?" The supervisor hesitated, then looked at Elena. "It depends," she said. "On you." Elena understood that without it being said. She let out a slow breath, her fingers resting lightly against the edge of the counter. For a moment, she closed her eyes, not to escape, but to think. The plane, the passengers, hundreds of people with their own schedules, their own lives. And Marcus, sitting comfortably, believing he had already walked away from her without consequence, believing the story ended at the gate. Elena opened her eyes again. "Keep it moving," she said. The supervisor blinked. "Mom?" "Do not delay the flight," Elena clarified. "If audit has a concern, they can handle it without grounding everyone on board." There was no hesitation in her voice now. The supervisor nodded immediately. Understood. She turned and spoke quickly into her headset. "Cancel delay request. Flight proceeds as scheduled." A beat. Confirmed. The tension in the agent's shoulders eased slightly, though confusion still lingered in his expression. He didn't understand the full picture, but he understood enough to know this wasn't a normal situation. Elena's phone buzzed again. This time, she answered without stepping away. "Yes." The audit flag came from internal finance. The voice on the other end said, "We're tracing the origin now. It's tied to a series of unauthorized transfers connected to a shared account." Elena's gaze flicked back to the screen. "I saw the transfers," she said. "Then you already understand the risk." "Yes." A pause. "Do you want us to escalate immediately? We can notify compliance and initiate a hold on all associated accounts." Elena's grip tightened slightly around the phone. She thought about the past year. The small inconsistencies she had noticed but never fully investigated. The expenses that didn't match. The quiet withdrawals Marcus had brushed off as business costs. She had let it go. Not because she didn't see it. Not yet, she said. Mom, if funds are being moved, I know. Elena cut in gently. But I want the full picture first. Another pause. Understood. Trace everything, she continued. Every transfer, every link count, and send it directly to me. Yes, Mom. She ended the call. The supervisor watched her closely now, not just with respect, but with awareness. Elena wasn't reacting emotionally. She wasn't making impulsive decisions. She was controlling the situation. What would you like to do about the passenger record? The supervisor asked. Elena turned back to the screen. Naomi's name remained there, tied to Marcus through financial activity that wasn't just casual. Not gifts, not occasional spending, structured, repeated, deliberate. How long has this been active? Elena asked. The agent hesitated, then leaned in to check. First transfer, about 8 months ago. 8 months. Elena absorbed that without visible reaction. 8 months of planning. 8 months of moving money quietly, thinking no one would notice. Or worse, thinking it didn't matter. Because it was hers, because she would never fight back. Keep the file open, Elena said. Yes, ma'am. Behind the glass, the aircraft began to move. Slow at first, then steady. Pushback had started. Marcus was on that plane, still unaware that the ground beneath him had already shifted. Still unaware that the life he thought he controlled was already being unraveled. Elena watched the movement for a second longer, then looked away. She reached into her coat again and pulled out a thin leather folder. It wasn't flashy, no branding, no visible label, just clean, worn edges. She opened it carefully. Inside were a few documents. Copies, not originals. She never carried originals. The top page bore a familiar heading, Prenuptial Agreement. The supervisor's eyes flickered to it, then quickly back to Elena's face. Elena didn't hide it. She turned one page, then another, stopping at a marked section. Asset Protection Clause, she said quietly. Section 7. The supervisor stepped slightly closer, reading without touching. Any undisclosed financial activity involving shared or misrepresented assets triggers immediate review, she read under her breath. Elena nodded. And potential restriction of access, the supervisor added. Yes. The agent shifted again, clearly out of his depth now. This applies to him? He asked before he could stop himself. Elena closed the folder slowly. It applies to anyone who thought they could use my name without understanding what it meant. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. The plane outside was now fully in motion, taxiing toward the runway. Elena slipped the folder back into her coat. Notify legal, she said. The supervisor straightened. Yes, Mom. Quietly, Elena added. No external filings yet, understood. And one more thing. The supervisor paused, waiting. Elena's gaze returned briefly to the departing aircraft. When that plane lands, she said, her voice calm but firm, I want every account connected to Marcus Ward reviewed. A beat and restricted, if necessary. The supervisor didn't hesitate this time. It will be done. Elena nodded once. Then she picked up her suitcase. For the first time since she had stepped into the terminal, she moved away from the counter. Not as someone left behind, but as someone who had already made her next move. Behind her, the system remained open. The file still visible. The transfers still recorded. Evidence. Not of a single betrayal, but of something much deeper. And as Elena walked toward the quieter end of the terminal, her phone lit up again. A new message. From legal. Preliminary review complete. Grounds established. She read it once. Then another line appeared. Do you want to proceed with immediate filing? Elena didn't stop walking, but her pace slowed just slightly. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Not because she didn't know the answer, because she knew exactly what it would set in motion. Elena didn't tap the screen right away. The question from legal sat there, simple and direct. Proceed with immediate filing. It would be clean, fast, efficient. Lawyers would take over. Marcus would receive documents before the plane even landed. Everything would shift in a matter of hours. But Elena didn't move. Not yet. She stepped out of the main terminal flow, moving toward a quieter corridor near the glass windows overlooking the runway. The aircraft was already rolling now, gathering speed, its lights cutting across the dim evening. Marcus was on that plane, still unaware. still thinking this was just another night where he had chosen someone else and gotten away with it. Elena slipped her phone into her coat pocket. Her attention wasn't on legal anymore. It was on the pattern. 8 months of transfers. Structured. Intentional. Not careless spending. Not emotional decisions. This was something Marcus had planned. Or worse, something he believed he was entitled to. Her phone buzzed again, another call. She answered immediately this time. Yes. We've mapped the accounts, the voice said. It's more complex than we initially thought. The funds weren't just moved between personal accounts. They were routed through a shell entity. Elena's gaze sharpened slightly. A shell? Yes. Registered under a consulting firm. Naomi Reed is listed as a partner. Elena said nothing for a moment. Outside, the plane reached the runway threshold. Lights aligned. Engines building. How much? She asked. A pause. 7.2 million across multiple transfers. Possibly more. We're still tracing. 7 million. Not an accident. Not a mistake. A decision. Elena closed her eyes briefly. For a second, the airport disappeared. The noise, the movement, everything. What replaced it wasn't anger. It was clarity. Freeze the accounts, she said. Immediately, yes. But do it through compliance, not direct override. I want it documented, understood, and flag the entity for audit. Full review. No internal shortcuts. Yes, Mom. She ended the call. Behind her, footsteps approached again. The supervisor. We've received additional confirmation from corporate, she said. Audit has escalated the request. They're asking if you want to issue a directive before the aircraft leaves the airspace. Elena looked at her. Not regarding the flight. The supervisor nodded. Then this is strictly financial. Yes. A brief silence passed. The supervisor hesitated, then asked, Do you want to involve law enforcement at this stage? Elena considered it. $7 million routed through a shell entity tied to her husband and his partner. Legally, it could become criminal, but timing mattered. No, she said, not yet. The supervisor studied her for a second, then nodded again. Understood. Elena turned back toward the window. The plane had begun its takeoff roll. Faster now. Committed. There was something almost symbolic about it. The momentum, the point of no return. Marcus had crossed his long before tonight. Elena reached into her coat again and pulled out her phone. The message from legal still waited. Proceed with immediate filing. Her thumb hovered, then she opened another contact. Not legal. She pressed call. It rang once. Twice, then answered. Miss Ward. His voice was older, calm, precise. Since Daniel, she said. I heard there was activity on your account, he replied. I assume this isn't routine. It isn't. A pause. Do you want me to step in? Elena watched the plane lift. For a brief moment, it hovered against the darkening sky. Then it climbed, steady and certain, disappearing into the clouds. Yes, she said quietly, but not publicly. I understand. I want a full forensic review, she continued, every transaction tied to Marcus. Personal, business, indirect. I want to know where the money went, who approved it, and who knew. You'll have it. And Daniel, yes? If anything in that report suggests intent to conceal or misrepresent marital assets, she let the sentence hang. I'll prepare the appropriate filings, he finished. Elena nodded slightly. Good, she ended the call. Behind her, the terminal had returned to normal. Passengers moving, announcements echoing. No one looking twice at the woman standing by the glass. No one knowing what had just shifted. The supervisor stepped closer again. Mom, we've secured all relevant records at this station, she said. Nothing leaves without authorization. Elena turned back. Good. And there's one more thing, the supervisor added carefully. The passenger linked to the transfers, Naomi Reed. Her profile has just triggered an internal alert. Elena's expression didn't change. What kind of alert? Frequent access to executive-level booking privileges. Unusual for her listed status. Elena absorbed that, of course. Naomi hadn't just been spending money. She had been using access. Access Marcus didn't have. Access he couldn't have had, unless someone gave it to him. Elena stepped closer to the counter again. Pull her full access history, she said. The agent hesitated, then moved quickly. A new screen opened, records, dates, authorizations, overrides, and then a name. Not Marcus, someone else. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. Who is that? She asked. The agent swallowed. That's a senior authorization code. It belongs to, he stopped. The supervisor leaned in, reading. Her expression changed. My mom, son, she said quietly. That code belongs to someone on the board. A pause. Not long, but heavy. Elena didn't blink, because now the pattern made sense. This wasn't just Marcus. This wasn't just Naomi. This went higher, much higher. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Daniel. Preliminary review flagged one internal sponsor. Name attached. Elena opened it. Read the name once, then again. And for the first time that night, something colder than grief settled in her chest, because she recognized it immediately, and it wasn't someone she had expected. Not at all. Elena didn't react right away. The name on the screen stayed there, sharp and undeniable, as if it had always been waiting for her to look closely enough. She read again, then once more, not because she didn't understand it, because she did. The supervisors shifted slightly beside her. Mom, do you recognize it? Elena exhaled slowly. Yes, that was all she said, but something in her tone made the supervisor straighten again. Do you want us to restrict that authorization code? She asked. Elena's gaze didn't leave the screen. No. The supervisor hesitated. Mom, if a board-level authorization is being used improperly, I know what it means, Elena said quietly. And I know what it doesn't. A beat. It means someone thought they could move through my company without me noticing. Her fingers rested lightly on the counter again. But it also means they believed I wouldn't look. Silence followed. The agent glanced between them, clearly lost now, but too aware to interrupt. Elena reached for her phone again. This time, she didn't call Daniel. She opened a different contact. The name sat there, familiar, trusted, or at least it had been. She pressed call. It rang longer than expected. Then finally, Elena. His voice was smooth, measured, the kind of voice that knew how to hold a room. Jonathan, she said. A pause. I heard there was some activity at one of the terminals, he said. Audit flagged something. I was just about to reach out. Of course he was. Elena's eyes flicked once more to the name on the screen. Jonathan Hale, board member, senior authority, one of the few people who had full visibility across divisions, and the code tied directly to Naomi's access. I'm glad you called, Elena said. I didn't, he corrected lightly. You did. She let that pass. There's a question about a set of transfers, she continued, and an authorization trail that leads back to you. The line went quiet for half a second. Then, that's unlikely, Jonathan said, still calm. I don't authorize operational access at that level. It would have to be a misclassification. Elena watched the data on the screen. Dates. Overrides. It's not, she said. Another pause. Longer this time. Where are you? He asked. At one of your gates. A faint shift in his tone. Subtle, but there. You mean one of ours, he said. Elena didn't respond to that. Then I assume this is being handled internally, he continued. No need to escalate beyond compliance. We can review it tomorrow at the board confirmation. Tomorrow, he wanted time. Of course he did. Elena's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. There won't be any delay, she said. Excuse me? I said there won't be any delay, Elena repeated, her voice still even. You'll review it tonight. Another silence. You're asking for an immediate board-level audit, Jonathan said. Without full context? I have enough context. And you believe that includes me? He asked, the edge in his voice just beginning to show. Elena's gaze didn't waver. I believe your code is attached to a pattern of unauthorized access and financial movement involving my husband and his partner. She didn't say Marcus's name. She didn't need to. The silence on the line stretched. Then Jonathan exhaled. Elena, he said, slower now. You're under a lot of pressure tonight. I understand that. But we should be careful about how we interpret incomplete data. Incomplete, that word again, always used when someone wanted more time, more room, more control. Elena stepped away from the counter, moving toward the glass again. The runway was empty now, the plane already gone. There's nothing incomplete about this, she said quietly. The transfers are real, the access is real, connection is documented. You're making a serious accusation, Jonathan replied. I'm making a documented observation, a beat. And I'm telling you that as of this moment, every account linked to that observation is under review. His tone shifted again. Not calm anymore. Careful. You're overstepping, he said. Elena almost smiled, not because it was funny, because it was familiar. I don't think you understand the position you're in right now, Jonathan added. Lena turned slightly, her reflection faint in the glass. No, she said softly. I think you don't understand the position you thought I was in. Silence. Heavy now. Measured. You've always preferred to stay behind the structure, he said after a moment. Layered ownership. Distance from visibility. It's what kept things efficient. It's what kept things quiet, Elena corrected. And safe, he added. For who? She asked. Instead, he shifted. We can resolve this internally, he said. No need to bring unnecessary attention to it, especially tonight. Especially tonight. After the airport, after the humiliation, after Marcus had made his choice so publicly. Elena closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, something had settled, not anger. Decision. No, she said. The word was quiet, but final. I'll see you at the board, she continued, and we'll go through everything in order. Elena, she ended the call. Behind her, the supervisor stepped closer again. Mom? Elena turned back toward the counter. Prepare a secure line for board notification, she said. The supervisor blinked. Tonight? Yes. All members? Elena held her gaze. All members. A pause. Then the supervisor nodded. Understood. The agent was already moving again, opening a new interface, hands faster now but more careful. Elena looked down at the screen once more. The name was still there. Jonathan Hale. Attached. Recorded. No longer invisible. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. From Daniel. We found additional links. It's bigger than initial estimate. Elena read it once. Then the next line appeared. You need to see this before the board call. A file began downloading. Slow. Heavy. The kind of file that carried more than numbers. Elena didn't move, didn't rush. She just watched the progress bar inch forward, because whatever was inside it would decide how far this went, and how many people would fall with it. The file finished downloading. Elena didn't open it immediately. She stood still for a moment, her phone warm in her hand, the weight of what she already knew settling into something sharper. The terminal noise felt distant now, like it belonged to a different place, a different version of the night. Mom? The supervisor said quietly. Elena looked up. Secure line is ready. Board notification can go out at your instruction. Elena nodded once. Hold it. The supervisor didn't question it. She simply stepped back, giving Elena space. Elena opened the file. It wasn't just numbers. It was structure. Entities layered under entities. Shell companies folded into consulting groups. Transfer paths mapped cleanly, each step documented with timestamps and authorizations. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't desperate. It was careful, planned. Her eyes moved across the report, reading faster now. Marcus's accounts, Naomi's firm, and then the link. Jonathan's authorization didn't just appear once. It appeared repeatedly. Overrides, access grants, silent approvals. Elena's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't someone misusing a code once. This was collaboration. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel. She answered without hesitation. You've seen it, he said. Yes. We traced the entity Naomi is using. It's not independent. It was funded initially through a corporate discretionary channel. Elena didn't speak. She already knew what he was going to say. It leads back to Jonathan, Daniel continued. He didn't just approve access. He helped set it up. Not shock, not anger, and confirmation. And Marcus, she asked. He's not sophisticated enough to build this, Daniel said. But he's been using it, repeatedly. Elena looked back at the screen. Marcus hadn't created the system. He had stepped into it, used it, benefited from it, believed it belonged to him. What's the exposure? She asked. Significant, Daniel replied. If this goes public, it's not just internal misconduct. It raises questions about governance. Elena's gaze sharpened. Then it doesn't go public, she said, a pause. Not yet. Understood. But we move, she added. Tonight. Daniel didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. Elena turned slightly, walking back toward the counter. The supervisor and agent both straightened as she approached. I need full board presence within the hour, Elena said into the phone. Secure line only. No assistance. No intermediaries. You'll have resistance, Daniel warned. I'm aware, and Jonathan? Elena's eyes flicked once to the name still displayed on the system. He'll join, she said. He won't have a choice. She ended the call. The supervisor stepped closer immediately. Mom, notify the board, Elena said. All members. Mandatory attendance, 1 hour. The supervisor blinked, then nodded. Yes, Mom, and restrict Jonathan Hale's access, Elena added. Partial lock. He keeps visibility, but no authorization privileges. The agent hesitated. That requires executive override, I know. Elena placed her hand flat on the counter. Do it. The agent moved quickly. The system shifted again, layers opening, permissions changing. A quiet but decisive adjustment. For the first time that night, Elena wasn't just observing. She was acting. Behind her, the terminal continued as if nothing had changed. But inside the system, everything was shifting. The supervisor spoke again, more carefully now. Mom, once we send this notification, there's no pulling it back. It formally initiates board-level inquiry, I understand. And if there's internal involvement at that level, Elena met her gaze, then it gets addressed at that level, a beat. The supervisor nodded. Sending now. She turned, issuing the directive. Within seconds, the system confirmed dispatch. Board notification sent. Elena exhaled slowly, not relief, just transition. The next phase had started. A message time from an unknown number. She opened it. You're making a mistake. No name, no signature. But she didn't need one. Elena typed back no. She hit send. A second later, her phone rang. Jonathan. She let it ring once, twice, then answered. Elena. His voice was different now. No smooth edge, no control layered over calm. You moved fast, he said. You moved first, she replied, a sharp exhale on the other end. You don't understand what you're stepping into, he said. This isn't just about your husband. This involves decisions made at a much higher level. I'm aware of the level, Elena said. Then you should also be aware of the consequences, he added. For the company, for the board, for you. Elena didn't respond immediately. She looked at the system again, at the records, at the trail that had been hidden in plain sight. For me? She repeated quietly. Yes, there it was, the warning, not subtle anymore. Elena's grip on the phone didn't change. Jonathan, she said, her voice calm, almost gentle, you've spent a long time assuming I wouldn't look too closely. That's not what this is, and you've spent even longer assuming I wouldn't act if I did. Silence. Heavy, measured. You should reconsider this, he said finally. Elena glanced toward the window again. The runway was empty now, still unmoving. No, she said, you should. She ended the call. The supervisor stepped back into view. All members confirmed, she said. They're joining remotely. Connection will be live in 40 minutes. Elena nodded. Good. The agent cleared his throat softly. Mom, what about the passenger file? Elena looked at the screen one more time. Marcus, Naomi, transfers, access. All of it still there. Leave it open, she said. He nodded quickly. Elena turned away from the counter. For the first time that night, she walked with direction that wasn't reactive, not following, leading. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel. One more thing, the message read. You need to see the last page. Elena stopped, opened the file again, scrolled, all the way to the end. And there, beneath the transaction logs, beneath the authorization trails, was something else. A draft agreement, not finalized, but prepared. Asset restructuring, ownership shift. Her name wasn't removed, but it was diluted significantly. Elena's eyes didn't move for a second. Because now it wasn't just theft, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan, a full one. And she had found it before they finished it. Her phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Board line initializing. Elena lifted her gaze slowly. Because whatever happened next wouldn't stay quiet anymore. The board line connected with a soft tone. One by one, faces appeared on the secured screen. Some in offices, some at home, some clearly pulled from whatever they had been doing moments before. There was confusion in their expressions, irritation in a few. And then there was awareness. Because Elena Ward didn't call unscheduled board meetings. Ever. Elena, one of them said, leaning forward slightly. We were told this was urgent. It is, she replied. Her voice was calm, measured, no emotion wasted. The supervisor and agent stood quietly behind her, out of frame, but close enough to hear. Jonathan joined last. His face appeared in the top corner, composed again, controlled, as if the earlier call had never happened. Let's proceed, he said. We're all here. Elena didn't acknowledge him directly. Instead, she reached forward and tapped the screen. The file appeared. Not the summary, the full structure. Transfers, authorization trails, linked entities. The room shifted. Confusion gave way to focus, eyes scanning, postures straightening. This was flagged less than an hour ago. Elena said. Initial audit tied irregular financial movement to a passenger account. She didn't say Marcus's name, not yet. But it's not a passenger issue, she continued. It's a governance issue. One of the board members frowned. What exactly are we looking at? Elena zoomed in. Naomi's entity, the transfers, the patterns. 7.2 million, she said. Moved over 8 months. Routed through a consulting structure that should not have access to these channels. Silence. Another board member leaned closer to his screen. Who authorized this? Elena didn't answer immediately. She let the question sit, the weight of it settle. Then she tapped again. Jonathan's authorization code appeared. Clear, repeated, undeniable. The silence that followed was different. Not confusion, recognition. Jonathan didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. All eyes had shifted to him. This requires context, he said finally, his voice controlled. Those authorizations are part of broader operational flexibility. They're not unusual in isolation. In isolation, Elena repeated quietly. She tapped again. More records appeared. Not just access, patterns, links. Approvals tied directly to Naomi's entity, repeated interactions. This isn't isolated, she said. Another board member spoke slower now. Jonathan, are you involved with this entity? No, he said immediately, too quickly. Elena didn't interrupt. She simply moved to the last page. The draft agreement, ownership restructuring. Her name, reduced. Significantly. A ripple went through the board. What is that? Someone asked. Elena answered this time. A proposed restructuring, she said. One that shifts controlling interest without formal disclosure. Another pause. Then that hasn't been approved, Jonathan said sharply. It's a draft. Nothing more. It's prepared, Elena replied. That doesn't mean it's actionable. It means it was intended to be. Their eyes met across the screen. Not as colleagues, not even as equals. As people who now understood exactly what the other knew. You're making assumptions, Jonathan said. I'm reading the document, Elena replied. A faint murmur spread across the board. One of the older members leaned back in his chair, studying both of them. We need clarity, he said. Right now, Elena nodded. You will have it, she said. Then she shifted the screen again. Marcus's name appeared. Passenger record. Linked accounts. Transfers. The connection to Naomi. The usage of funds. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Because this part wasn't corporate. It was personal. Elena, someone began carefully. She didn't look at them. This is my husband, she said simply. No emotion, no explanation, just fact. Another pause. Then, and he had access to these funds? A board member asked. No, Elena said. He believed he did. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. This is exactly why we need to handle this carefully. Mixing personal matters with corporate. This is not personal, Elena cut in. Her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. This is misappropriation of company-linked assets through unauthorized channels, enabled by a board-level authorization. Silence. No one interrupted this time, because the framing had changed. Completely. Jonathan held her gaze. You're escalating this beyond what's necessary. No, Elena said. I'm bringing it to the level it was always at. Another board member spoke. What are you requesting? Elena didn't hesitate. Immediate suspension of Jonathan Hale's authorization privileges, she said. Pending full investigation. The words landed clean, direct, unavoidable. Jonathan's expression didn't break, but something behind it did. You don't have unilateral authority to, I do, Elena said. Final. Another pause. Longer this time, because now the question wasn't what had happened. It was who controlled what happened next. One of the senior members cleared his throat. We need a vote. Yes, Elena said. Jonathan leaned back slightly. Before that, I suggest we consider the implications. A suspension at this level will trigger internal review. External scrutiny, it should. Elena replied, their eyes held again. Then the senior member spoke, all in favor of temporary suspension pending investigation. One by one, hands went up. Not immediately, not eagerly, but steadily, until the count was clear. Majority, Jonathan didn't move, didn't speak, he didn't need to. The decision had already been made. The senior member nodded slowly. Authorization suspended, effective immediately. The system updated in real time. Elena watched it happen, not with satisfaction, with precision. Because this wasn't the end, it was the first correction. Jonathan exhaled once, controlled again. This isn't over, he said. Elena met his gaze. I know. The line went quiet for a moment. Then another board member spoke. What about the financial side? Elena glanced down briefly at her phone. Another message from Daniel, all linked accounts frozen. Additional exposure confirmed. She looked back up. That's already in motion, she said. A pause. And the individual involved? Someone asked carefully. Elena didn't answer immediately. For the first time since the call began, her thoughts shifted not to the board, not to Jonathan, but to Marcus. On that plane, unaware. Still believing he had walked away clean. Elena's expression didn't change. We'll address that next, she said. The board watched her closely now, because whatever came next wouldn't stay contained. And far above the city, the plane carried him forward, unaware that the ground he had left behind had already started to disappear. The board call didn't end immediately. No one disconnected. No one spoke for a few seconds either, because the room, digital as it was, had shifted into something heavier than discussion. This wasn't a routine decision anymore. It wasn't even just a governance issue. It was exposure. Elena stood still, her hand resting lightly against the edge of the counter, the glow of the screen reflecting faintly in her eyes. One of the board members finally leaned forward. We need to understand the scope, he said. If this restructuring draft was executed, it wasn't, Elena said. He nodded. But it was prepared, yes. And funded through internal channels, yes. The repetition wasn't defensive. It was precise. Jonathan hadn't disconnected. He remained there, silent now, his expression unreadable. But the absence of control was new. Subtle, but clear. Elena, another member said carefully, what exactly are you proposing as the next step? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her phone. Daniel had sent another update. Marcus's personal accounts flagged. Naomi's entity frozen. Linked access restricted. The system was already tightening, not visibly, but effectively. Elena lifted her gaze again. We proceed in order, she said. What does that mean? The older member asked. It means we separate the issues, Elena replied. Corporate, then personal. A faint shift moved through the board. Jonathan's voice came back, quieter now, controlled again. There is no separation here. You're the one tying them together. Elena turned her head slightly toward his image on the screen. No, she said. You did that when you used company authorization to enable personal access. Silence. He didn't respond, because there wasn't a clean way to. Elena looked back at the others. Corporate side is already in motion, she continued. Authorization suspended. Audit initiated. Documentation preserved. And the personal side? Someone asked. That question hung differently. Because this wasn't just about policy anymore. This Elena exhaled slowly. My legal team is preparing a filing, she said. The words were simple, but the meaning wasn't. A few faces shifted. Divorce? One of them asked, blunt. Elena didn't soften it. Yes, another pause. Grounds? Someone else asked. Elena glanced briefly at the open file still displayed on the screen. Financial misrepresentation, she said. Breach of agreement. Misuse of marital assets. She didn't say betrayal. She didn't need to. Jonathan leaned forward slightly again. You're moving fast. Elena looked at him. You moved first, she repeated. His jaw tightened. You're going to drag this into public record, he said. That affects more than just him. Elena held his gaze. I'm not dragging anything, she said. I'm documenting what already exists. Another silence followed, because now the direction was clear. Not emotional, not reactive. Structured, deliberate. Exactly the way Elena had always handled everything. The older board member nodded slowly. Then the company proceeds with audit, and you proceed privately. Yes, Elena said. And there's no overlap? There doesn't need to be, she replied. But everyone in the room knew there would be, because the same actions that triggered one had created the other. The call began to wind down after that, not abruptly, but with the quiet understanding that the next steps were already in motion. One by one, screens went dark, until only a few remained. Jonathan didn't leave. Elena, he said, once the others had disconnected. She didn't respond immediately. I can still contain this, he continued, internally, quietly, without escalation. Elena almost smiled again, not out of amusement, out of recognition. The same offer, the same assumption. That she would choose silence, that she would protect the structure, at her own expense. No, she said. A beat. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Elena's voice didn't change. It was already bigger than you thought it was. Another pause, then he said more quietly, "You're not just removing him, you're removing leverage." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Leverage?" "Yes," Jonathan said. "He may not understand what he's part of, but he's still connected to it." Elena's expression stilled, because that wasn't a warning. That was information. "What exactly is he connected to?" she asked. Jonathan didn't answer directly. "Be careful how far you push this," he said instead. Elena watched him for a second longer. Then she ended the call. The screen went dark. Behind her, the supervisor stepped closer again. "Mom?" Elena turned back. "Legal is ready," the supervisor said. "They're asking for final confirmation before filing." Elena nodded once. "Send it." The supervisor didn't hesitate. She stepped away, relaying the instruction. Elena stood still. Not because she was unsure, but because she understood exactly what she had just set in motion. A legal process that wouldn't stop once it started, a financial investigation that would keep unfolding. And somewhere above the clouds, Marcus still had no idea. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Daniel, it wasn't legal. It was a number she knew. Marcus. She stared at the screen for a second, then answered. "Elena." His voice came through, slightly distorted by the cabin connection, but unmistakable. Casual. "Unaware. Where are you?" he asked. Elena didn't respond immediately. She could hear faint background noise behind him, the low hum of the plane, a voice in the distance. "Naomi, maybe. I made it on the flight," he continued. "There was some confusion at the gate, but it's handled. You'll have to catch the next one." Elena closed her eyes briefly, not in pain, in clarity, because he truly believed it, every word. "I know," she said, a pause. Something in her tone must have shifted. "What does that mean?" Marcus asked. Elena opened her eyes. "It means you should enjoy the flight," she said quietly. Another pause. "Why are you talking like that?" Elena didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "When you land, check your messages." A beat. "What messages?" She didn't explain. Because she didn't need to. "Safe flight, Marcus." And then she ended the call. The phone went still in her hand. Behind her, the supervisor returned. "It's done," she said. "Filing submitted." Elena nodded. Then she turned toward the windows one last time. The sky was empty now, no plane in sight, just darkness, and somewhere inside it, everything he thought he still had was already gone. Marcus didn't understand it, even at the end. He stood outside the glass doors of a firm he used to walk into without thinking, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice tight, repeating the same question to anyone who would still answer him. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen?" The responses were always the same, polite, distant. Final, he had signed documents he never read, accepted access he never questioned, built a life on something he thought he controlled, and then, piece by piece, it had all been removed. Not taken, returned to where it had always belonged. Naomi was gone before the second week ended, quietly. No confrontation, no dramatic exit. Just a message that said she couldn't be involved in legal complications and financial instability. His parents stopped calling after the third week. Not out of loyalty to Elena, but because there was nothing left to defend, no lifestyle to protect, no advantage to maintain. Marcus was left with explanations he couldn't finish, and a version of the story that no one else believed anymore, because the facts were too clear. The filings had gone through, the prenup had held, the audit had confirmed everything, and Elena had said nothing beyond what was necessary. No interviews, no statements, no attempt to humiliate him in return. She didn't need to. The truth had done that on its own. Across the city, in a quiet office that overlooked nothing particularly impressive, Elena sat at a simple desk with a stack of documents in front of her. Not contracts, not financial reports, applications, letters, requests. The foundation had started small, intentionally. No press release, no gala, just a network of support for women who had been financially dependent, misled, or erased inside relationships that looked stable from the outside. She didn't call it charity. She called it transition, because she knew exactly what it felt like to stand in a life that wasn't yours anymore, holding nothing but silence and the expectation to endure it. Her phone buzzed lightly beside her. "Daniel." "Everything finalized," he said when she answered. "All remaining ties severed, no outstanding exposure." Elena nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Thank you. A pause. You could push further, he added. There were options. She knew what he meant. Penalties. Public filings, extended claims, a longer fall. I know, she said, and you didn't. No. Another pause, softer this time. You're sure? Elena looked down at the papers in front of her, at the names, the stories that hadn't ended yet. I'm not interested in watching him lose more, she said. I'm interested in not carrying any of it with me. Daniel didn't respond right away, then quietly, that makes sense. After the call ended, Elena sat there for a moment longer, not thinking about Marcus, not replaying anything, just breathing in a space that no longer required her to explain herself. Outside, the city moved the same way it always had. Busy, indifferent. Inside, everything felt still, whole. Later that afternoon, she stepped out of the building alone. No driver waiting, no one following, just her. She walked without urgency, past people who didn't know her name, past windows that reflected a version of her that no longer needed to shrink. At a crosswalk, she paused. A plane cut across the sky above the buildings. For a second, the memory surfaced. The gate, the silence. The moment he told her to watch it leave, she didn't flinch. She didn't hold on to it either. It passed like everything else had. Because it no longer defined anything about her. Not her worth. Not her choices. Not her future. Somewhere Marcus was still trying to understand what had happened. Still telling the story like something had been taken from him. Still missing the part where he had never really seen what was standing in front of him. Elena didn't need him to understand. She didn't need anyone to. She had already moved past the point where explanation mattered. What remained was simple. Her name. Her decisions. Her life fully her own. She crossed the street as the light changed, blending into the rhythm of people who were all going somewhere. No spotlight, no announcement. Just a woman who had walked through everything and come out intact. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, silence doesn't mean weakness.